as we reach the end of 2010, it's finally time to expand the Horde. Well, this Horde, the Horde from Masters of the Universe. In the Masters of the Universe Classics line, I'm Scott ToyGuru Neitlich. I was the brand manager for about 95% of Masters of the Universe Classics, outside kind of the last few items in 2016 and the Super 7 items. And today we're talking about our second Horde member in the Classics line, which is none other than the fuzzball himself, Grizzlor, who honestly I think was my favorite Horde figure when I was a kid. Maybe Modulok came in a second. Oh, I like Mantenna too. Okay, I liked all the Horde. I had all of them. They were amazing. There was this new faction of villains. When it came time to doing the Classics figure, we obviously had a lot of talk of how do we do this? Do we sculpt the figure and sculpt the fur like, a la Beastman or Chief Carnivus, if you will? There was definitely really, really cool fan customs done this way. And as I always say, I absolutely applaud customizers who can do this because I do not have this talent. Here's what he might have looked like if he was done as a sculpted figure instead of a fluffy figure, shall we say. We also, talked about just, doing a bear and taking like the bear from, the Barbie line and packaging it and calling it Grizzlor and seeing if anyone would notice and seeing if we could get away with that because that way there'd be no tooling. But we figured people would notice pretty quickly that that wasn't actually Grizzlor. Well, looking at the vintage line, I'm totally kidding. We would have never done that. Looking at the vintage line, obviously what stood out about Grizzlor, other than his color scheme with the brown and red and yellow, is the fact that he has, if you will, real hair or, fur as part of the action figure. So after discussing different ways to execute him as a toy, it was decided to go with fur. So we did not go with the sculpting method. We went with the fur method because it was kind of like with Roboto with the gears. The fur just sort of defined who Grizzlor was. And, it just felt like doing him without fur wasn't doing him justice in Classics, and I don't think we got too many complaints. One variant in the vintage line we kind of had to look at was there was a darker version of Grizzlor where his faceplate was more of a black than a brown, and his fur was even a little darker colored. I think this was the one that came in the 2-pack with Hordak. I could be mistaken. I'm sure people will point out in the comments that I'm totally wrong, but either way, we went with the more well-known version of Grizzlor for Classics. Again, it would have been a great variant maybe down the line. I could see this as being like a PowerCon thing or, a New York Toy Fair thing or Comic-Con thing. But the version we did was traditional. It was, based on the vintage figure all the way. No need to spice it up with the darker version at this point. That would have taken a whole new figure. There was no way you could get, a twofer out of this. It would have definitely been a repaint for down the line, which we obviously never got to. And this was the Grizzlor I had. I did not have the dark one. Maybe if I did, I would have pushed more to get that variant in like I did with the blue-winged Stratos. So I was basing it off of what I had as a kid. So how do we do the fur? We used a sock. I mean, not literally a sock, but that's what the fur is. It's basically, it slips onto the figure like a sock. I mean, it's custom made, obviously, to fit the figure with holes for the arms, legs, and head, but it's basically as simple as that. It just kind of goes right on, just like a sock. That's even what they call it in the toy industry, is a sock. That's the technical term for when you do that. And this worked really well. I mean, obviously, the head had its own glued-on fur piece. It was not part of the sock piece. That was the main body, but that was essentially, how he was done, and he had Beastman's body underneath with Beastman's legs and arms sticking out. And it was a great reuse of the furry buck, if you will, that was also used for Stratos and Chief Carnivus and stuff like that. And I do always love it when we can reuse parts in that way. I think he used Hordak's boots. And it was great because that using the shared parts was actually part of what brought the whole toy line together and made it feel cohesive. So I was really glad when we could do things like that, using the Beastman parts for Grizzlor. And of course, the Horsemen, again, above and beyond, they just, went the extra mile with him. His Horde armband there was slip-on, which was great because then we didn't have to tool a new arm. But they did this amazing holster on his back that held all of his weapons. He came fully loaded. He had an axe and a sword and his vintage crossbow. I'm saying bow and arrow, his vintage crossbow, and they all clipped onto his back. I always loved the way they did that. They really tried to do that with figures so you could store the weapons. His bio was not too bad. It used some elements from some of his early appearances, him coming from Jugular, the planet, his name being kind of in his own language, and there were some issues with his reveal. There were some early leaks with him. We actually had two. The first being he was on the back of Molar's package, and the only version we had to shoot was the wrong colors. The colors of the fur was a little bit too bright. And it even said, like, it doesn't come with the effing drill that's in his eye. So that was kind of how fans first learned about him, was from the Molar package with the incorrectly colored fur, because that was the only photo sample we had. And then, of course, there's the issue with the 2000X look. So the 2000X version of Grizzlor, which appeared very briefly in episode 35, the Powers of Grayskull episode with all the rest of the Horde, and was done as an awesome Staction figure, he had different kind of face plate, if you will. And the easiest way to put it is there was a lot of bad blood surrounding the 2000X line because, as I've noted in a few other videos, even though it did well with collectors, as a mass retail line aimed at kids, it was considered a failure, or I believe the technical term is did not meet sales expectations. So we won't call it a failure. We'll just say it didn't meet sales expectations. Well, I kind of had a strategy on this one, and it was kind of the idea to sort of wait it out. I knew that people switched around a lot, and if I stuck with classics, in time, the team that had worked on 2000X and management would kind of move on to other brands or leave the company or go on to do other things in the company, and they basically, the new team coming in, wouldn't care if we did 2000X stuff. And that kind of paid off. It did work in the end, but the Horsemen had sculpted Grizzlor's second face, and when I totally screwed up here. When Toy Fair magazine was asking for images of Grizzlor to reveal, I didn't look at the image I sent them, and I totally sent them an image that had the second faceplate there in the shot, which we knew was not going to be included with the figure at this point. And I was like, oh my god, I totally screwed up. I sent them the wrong image, and now this is going to go like viral, and yeah, I was like kicking myself because it was me that sent them the image, and I clicked on and sent the wrong one. I had like 100 different images I could have sent. Well, maybe not 100, but 10, let's say. And of course, I sent them the one with the second faceplate. That was not going to be included with the figure, especially at the time that we were even sending that. Now, eventually, this faceplate, if you will, was released in the Heads of Eternia pack, and you'll notice when the Heads of Eternia pack was revealed, they showed the Grizzlor second face as just a faceplate, because that's how it was designed to work. It was going to be a swappable faceplate that pulled out of the front. But by the time the pack came out, the new team that had taken over, I'd left Mattel, realized that the faceplate, because we weren't going to do the swappable faceplate, it was glued in place, which meant they couldn't just do the faceplate. They actually had to produce an entire head for Grizzlor. But you can see from their reveal of this pack, the original plan, they were just going to do the faceplate until I think they grabbed a sample of Grizzlor and realized, oh, the faceplate is glued in place. Originally, if we were able to do the 2000X head as planned, it was just going to be, it was going to pop right out, and you were going to pop on the second faceplate. So that was the original idea for how it was going to work. And then when the face eventually wound up in the Heads of Eternia pack to do 2000X heads, which, like I said, you kind of wait out that team, and once that team had kind of moved on, it was much more kosher to do 2000X stuff. And the head that wound up in this pack was a full Grizzlor head that had to be popped off the peg, just like any other head. So just kind of an interesting anecdote of how things change over time, and how originally it would have just been a faceplate swap, which became a full head swap when the toy was finally made. But what a face! I mean, come on, that is just like the Horsemen. I mean, they just nail it. They nail it every time. The details, the wrinkle lines, the tusks. Great figure. Yeah, what can I say? I love Grizzlor. I think they just nailed it with him. And we even got to add some cool stuff in the bio about him actually not being evil, but rather he was brainwashed by the Horde, which came out of some of the original material that was written about him. I tried to dig up as much as I could, and incorporate that. So here's how he kind of looks as he's decked out in 2000X. We did include the little loincloth piece, because armor was okay, but not faces. That was sort of the rule. I know it's weird, but that was kind of how it was, and you had to play by the rules. What can I say? Then the last thing to mention, especially in relation to the bio, was the mini comic that came with the vintage Grizzlor. Talked about, it was called like Grizzlor, the legend comes alive. And that's why in the bio, it mentions him becoming kind of an urban legend spoken about around campfires and stuff. And it was kind of a nod to the title of his mini comic. We tried to incorporate everything into classics. It's what the line was all about and what made it cool.